Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to the EUROPARC webinar. It's great to see such a big participation. So we have people from all over Europe, but also from South America. Welcome all. My name is Barbara Paes, and I will be with you for the next hour. I'm very glad that today we are discussing such an important program within EUROPARC protected areas. So today, our webinar is co-organized with the EU platform on coexistence between people and large carnivores. We will hear three very interesting examples on how we can better monitor the lynx and the brown bear populations in Europe. We have invited three special case study presenters. But before we go directly into our topic of today, I would like just to give you a brief introduction of what EUROPARC is. So EUROPARC was created in the 70s to help parks protecting nature. And what we have realized is that the best way to protect nature is by bringing people together. Because nature knows no borders. And despite the political borders that we have seen in Europe changing constantly, nature doesn't see it like that. So we have flocks of birds or populations of mammals that just roam across the different countries. And that's why we believe that nature is better protected through international cooperation. So in 2003, we have set up the Transboundary Parks program, a program that is specifically addressed to protected areas who share a border, who share natural heritage or a park across borders. And what we try to do is to make them have a shared vision for the larger area, so beyond the protected area, beyond their national country. And we do this by bringing these people together and giving them a program to work with, a methodology to search for mutual understanding, so they can together install a new cooperative management, and especially on conservation efforts such as monitoring and working together with tourists or with any other features within the parks. So the TransParkNet meeting is brought together every year to produce innovative tools and to work together for the benefit of their natural heritage. You can learn all about the Transboundary Parks program on our website. And one of the things that we try to do is to create tools to better support transboundary parks to manage their features. And for that, we have started a toolkit, Large Carnivores in Transboundary Protected Areas. And this toolkit is available already on our website. You can find it here. But this toolkit is not yet complete. As you know, we are working, we need your work. We need to know your project. So please, if you are working in the field of large carnivores in Europe and you have an interesting methodology you would like to share, just submit a case study within EUROPARC and we will be glad to feed it into our toolkit. Our transboundary parks, they spread all over Europe. Currently, we have 10 transboundary protected areas and a total of 23 protected areas working together. Today, we will travel to the very highest north of Europe and hear an example on the brown bear monitoring program in the Pasvikinari Trilateral Park between Finland, Norway and Russia. And we will also hear a very interesting example on the Eurasian lynx conservation from the Bavarian Forest and the Shemava National Park. Without taking any further minutes of your attention, let me just introduce you the agenda. We will hear Roderick Endering. He will tell us about the European Federation for Hunting and Organization And we'll also make us a short overview of the work of the EU platform on coexistence of large carnivores and people, as FACE, like EUROPARC, is a member of the EU platform. And then we will go to Šumava National Park in Czech Republic to hear about their project on monitoring the region links. Pardon. And finally, we'll hear an example from Norway. What is important is that throughout the presentations, please write down your questions in the chat box that we have already been using, because in the end, we will have an interactive debate. And I would like to ask pardon, all the questions to our participants. So without taking any longer, I will pass now to Snorre, I will pass now to Roderick, who will tell us all about the FACE work. Roderick, the floor is yours.
Hello. I hope that everybody can hear me. Thank you very much for inviting us, Barbara, for this nice opportunity to not only present what we do and what hunters do, but also what we do with the EU platform on large carnivores. Just briefly to give you a very short summary of what FACE is. We represent 7 million hunters from 36 countries, including every country currently in the EU and also some countries outside of the EU. Address the political and environmental aims to make sure that there's the best possible context for hunting and thus also for conservation, which is something that we rely on. We, as hunters, see large carnivores as a crucial part of our environment, which is especially the case for countries where the large carnivores have never disappeared, and also true for the countries where certain carnivores are making their return, where certain issues also may arise. And I've listed two very important conflicts from our side. Well, the most important one is conflicts with agricultural interest, so mainly attacks on livestock. And as we are talking today as well on some of the Scandinavian countries, an important conflict there is attacks on hunting dogs. Our aim is that you need to create acceptance for large carnivores, but we also see the need for more than only communication. You also need action on the ground, specifically local action that is tailored to the needs of local and regional people. And there is flexibility in the EU framework for carnivores and also in the Berne Convention framework for carnivores. And we also see as a need that where populations are in a good status, at some point you can change the protection status, most importantly to be able to use funding for more important, more protected species that need more action on the ground. To now turn briefly to the EU platform. So the EU platform has been established in 2014. You can see the mission on the slide. And it's a great way for us, at least for FACE, and I assume also for EUROPARC and for the other members, to work together with some of the major organizations in the EU that all work on large carnivores. I have a short list of all the members of the platform later. To briefly also explain that. The key principles of the EU platform is to work within the EU legal framework, which is mostly the Habitats Directive, and there's also some other key pieces of legislations and policy that make up the legal framework for the large carnivores in Europe. Another key aim is to ensure the necessary knowledge base, where, for example, the platform collects a lot of case studies, which can all be found on the platform website, to recognize socioeconomic and cultural considerations and concerns, which is a key part of the EU policy on large carnivores. This is exactly what we would like to address as well. It's the social acceptance of large carnivores. And also to do that is you need to find solutions to conflicts that are already occurring, and mostly through constructive dialogue. One of the most important tools of the platform is the organization of workshops. There's one plenary meeting each year in Brussels, where all the members of the platform get together. And there's usually 2 regional platforms where we try to go to a country either to highlight good practice or to talk about certain problems that are in that region, or potentially both. Then how does that work? We basically share a lot of experience with each other through the organizations, and thus today also presents a very good opportunity for me to learn from the experiences within EUROPARC. We try to engage in dialogue, always trying to seek consensus. So always to search where the common ground is and where we can accept certain solutions to the conflicts and problems that arise. There needs to be a certain willingness with the organizations, and especially a willingness to transfer and also test those examples. So you need to be open to what other people say as well. So they show a lot of the good examples, especially through case studies and presentations at workshops. And one thing that the members need to do is that there is enough, they need to ensure that there is enough capacity to fully engage in the work of the platform. In that we're also supported by the European Commission, who has dedicated staff to large carnivores, and that also helped the platform functioning. The platform itself is a co-secretariat between the European Commission and the European Landowners Association, and the secretariat is also supported by a consultancy that does most of the work. Then the membership of the platform, you'll see here the current members. I see that EUROPARC is half of the page. I hope it's only on my screen. It shouldn't be the case. But of course, as the co-secretariat ELO, us, the European Hunting Federation, there's the joint representatives of the Finnish and Swedish reindeer herders. There's the CSC, which is more of a global or international hunting organization. The IUCN, usually the EU office, and the LCIE, which is the Large Carnivore Initiative for Europe, supports our work. The WWF, usually the European office, EUROPARC, and unfortunately, when the platform started, we also had the European farmers as our membership, but unfortunately they decided to leave the platform at a certain point, and we as the hunters and also other platform members and the platform itself is always trying to re-engage with them, because as I said, most of the conflicts actually arise with agricultural interest. It's important for them to be actually a part of this. And the platform activities, there are an annual and a multi-annual work plan for certain actions planned. I've listed the most important ones here. You see a lot of the communication activities, events, so that's usually our annual meeting and the regional workshops. We've had already a couple of them, and we do some research and data gathering. And where I say research, it's not empirical research on the ground, but it's either an analysis of good practice, examination of uses of certain policies. There's a very good leaflet on the use of agricultural funding for large carnivore conservation on the platform website. So a lot of the things that come out of the platform can be found on the website, which I think we can provide a link to. Then more about the hunters and monitoring, and Barbara has asked me to focus on what is happening in Scandinavia, more specifically on Norway and Swedish cross-border cooperation on the monitoring of large carnivore. So we, as FACE, always say that monitoring is actually one of the most important contributions of hunters to conservation. Being able to gather that knowledge, to gather that data, and to share it is a very important one. And it's actually a very old form of citizen science, which is becoming really popular again. There's different ways of doing it. In Sweden and Norway, they have a cross-border cooperation. They have some common criteria for monitoring. They usually do their monitoring in winter. They have common criteria for approval for observations done by citizens, or in our case by hunters. And there is a shared status report with also including a English summary, which summarizes the most important findings of the past monitoring season. Observations can be submitted and they are shown through a website, which is really interesting. I have a screenshot of that website in the next slide. There's a lot of information in there. It's not only from hunters actually, but a lot of the information actually comes from hunters because they are out there a lot. They will see a lot. They can collect a lot of data, and actually this is one of the best examples of how that can contribute. So I've just listed a couple of takeouts from the most recent monitoring exercise, where hunters, for example, collected almost 1,000 DNA samples for the wolf, and collected more than 95% of the DNA samples for bear. And also camera traps are increasingly becoming very important. The only problem was that until recently it was illegal to, I think, share them. I'm not 100% sure about it, but at least they're starting to use it now a lot. And they also have a very interesting website where you can find all of the camera footage. For Sweden, it's mostly links, but that's really interesting to see what kind of images they can collect, and you can actually scroll through the images and sometimes even videos of, for example, the links. So just as an example of what kind of things they collect, these are two examples. So on the left side, so these are both data entries in their website-based monitoring system. So this one is data entry on DNA. You can see the date. It's quite recent. I think this was one of the most newest ones. So you can even see what it is. DNA from scat from a wolf. You can see the DNA barcodes. You can see whether it has been analyzed. This one had not been analyzed, but it was from the day before yesterday. So that's well, you can imagine that that's possible. And another one that I chose was you can also monitor the conflicts. So that is also quite important. It also tells you something about the activity of the animals. So this one was a reindeer injured by a lynx. You can see it was confirmed, and then probably also the damage was conveyed. So you can see a lot of dots here. Those green ones, they represent a lot of dots, and if you zoom in, you can find the more specific ones. I have the websites listed on my next slide, and I think EUROPARC can share this presentation, so you can actually go to the website yourself and see what kind of data is collected. Because I must say, this is not something that comes from FACE as our organization. This is really done by the government and the government agency responsible for this. It has a lot of involvement from the local hunters. It's actually supported by them as well. And so if there's any specific questions that I can't answer today, we can always revert back to our Swedish or Norwegian membership. Some of the methods that they used, and I focus mainly on the wolf. They use snow tracking and DNA analysis of sketch, urine, and hair. And then they also use a lot of, so that is like the core information, and then they also use a lot of other different data sources. And they actually call upon the general public to submit more data to add them in their analysis. I've just listed the result of I think this was the 2017-2018 monitoring report on the wolf. So very interesting is that you can also see that there are certain cross-border groups. They've had 5 in total, so the border between Norway and Sweden. You see the approximate for the amount of wolves that they have. And they also have some interesting findings from the genetics. So, for example, the influx of individuals from the Finnish-Russian population, and some other information as well. So I've listed here the report. This one was the particular report on the wolf in the 2017-2018 report. It has an English summary. You can see the ScanDocs, which is, if I remember correctly, that's the way to enter the data. And as you see, if I just go back to this is the ROV base. And this is where you can actually find all the information, all the data entries. If you go to these websites, they actually provide translations for certain parts of the website in English, which is pretty handy. And also, if you go through this website, you should be able to find also the other reports on previous monitoring seasons, because they've used this cross-border monitoring, I think, since 2014, 2015. And you also should be able to find other species, if I'm correct. But I've only looked at this specific one on the Scandinavian wolf. So that was my presentation for today. You can find more information on our functioning on our website. We have a dedicated page to large carnivores. And you can also find my email address if you have further questions after this webinar. So thank you for now, and I'm looking forward to the questions. And if I'm not able to answer them now, we can certainly take it for after the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roderick. A very interesting phase of engaging with the community. May I ask you, Roderick, is everyone allowed to submit an observation, or it's exclusively for hunters?
Yes, as far as I know, everybody can submit the information. I'm not quite sure how they deal with, for example, DNA, because I can vote, but that's not something that I'm familiar with. But I can imagine that not just anybody can grab things. So that is a little bit of a question mark for myself. But for the website that I showed, actually everybody can submit a observation, and then they have a certain protocol to also verify, because it can be sometimes be tricky to, for example, distinguish certain species from each other, or sometimes even a wolf from a dog that really looks like a wolf. So they have a protocol to verify the observations. And also, for example, there's a separate website for the game traps, the camera traps. And I think everybody can submit it there, and they use it more as supplementary information for the monitoring than as their core monitoring.
Okay, thank you very much, Roderick. So to all participants, please feel free to write down your questions. We will be addressing your questions to Roderick after the next two presentations. I didn't have the possibility to introduce Roderick. I just want to make sure that you know that Roderick is a wildlife policy officer, and his work is on bridging hunters and conservationists on the ground with the EU policymakers. So thank you once more, Roderick, for your presentation. And now I would like to invite Ludiek from the Szumava National Park to introduce us his case study on how to monitor the Eurasian lynx. Ludiek is a zoologist. He's been working for Szumava National Park for the past 30 years, and he's mainly working on research, on site coordination, and he specialized for many years on the work of large carnivores. So Ludiek, the floor is yours. Okay, we are trying to connect the audio of Ludiek. I guess it will work fast. Okay, it seems that we have a small problem with the audio of Ludiek. So we will first hear from Snorre, and then we will go back to Ludiek. So Snorre, you have the floor now. So we make a small change, and instead of going to the Bavarian Forest and Szumava National Park, we will go to the high up north in the trilateral Pasvikinari Transboundary Park. Snorre, it's yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming to listen to us talking about our projects. Quickly about our research station up there in the north of Norway. We have specialized in using genetic tools to monitor wildlife, and in particular brown bears. And in this talk, I'm going to tell you about this project that is a border crossing monitoring effort shared between Norway. Through my talk, I would like to inform you a little bit about the benefits of non-invasive genetic monitoring of bears, how it's done, and the benefits of it. And then I will go into the importance of this particular monitoring program in the border area between Finland, Norway, and Russia. And then I will show you how exactly we do things to get an overview of the brown bear population in the area. And then I will tell you a little bit about the challenges of carrying out such an effort. Let's see. I need to switch the slides here. Thank you. Well, non-invasive genetic sampling has lots of benefits, and the previous speaker, Roderick, he also touched upon this, that there are important information about our carnivore populations that can be gained from actually collecting genetic material. You can study connectivity among populations. You can study family relationships. You get lots of important information that could aid in conservation of large carnivores in nature. Here you see some pictures, because non-invasive sampling is basically about collecting, for example, scats or feces out in the field, or hairs. And this can be done systematically by, for example, a country's state nature inspectorate, or it's a very good exercise of citizen science. So in Norway and Sweden, as was mentioned, lots of people actually collect scats of large carnivores, such as bears, and they send it in for DNA analysis. And our lab has specialized in DNA analysis of brown bears in particular, and actually analyzes all DNA samples from all of Norway each year. Next slide. There. So the principle of using non-invasive genetic monitoring is simple. You collect template in the field, meaning then a scat or a hair or something, and you bring it to the lab. You analyze it with genetic methods to produce a specific genetic profile that is unique for each individual. And for large carnivores, which usually live for many years, if you do this continuously across years with good sampling efforts also geographically, you very soon get a good picture of where each individual has its home range, whether it moves from area to area between years, and even if it crosses national borders. And because we have worked with non-invasive genetic monitoring for so many years, we have a very big genetic database. So when we get new samples from the field, we can immediately check if this individual is known from before in, for example, Norway or Sweden or Finland or Russia. And then we can see where it has been found before. And if it's not found, we add a new individual, a genetic profile to our database to aid in future studies. Just quickly mention that in Norway and Sweden, non-invasive genetic monitoring has been implemented on a national scale. And they use it actually to estimate the size of the populations, especially of the brown bear, but also the other ones. And they actually can use, because of these large databases, mark recapture methods to estimate population size. And in Norway, non-invasive genetic monitoring is done nationwide every year. And both the public and the state nature inspectorate work to collect samples in the field. That is the basis of this monitoring. Hair snares is an interesting tool for collecting genetic material non-invasively from brown bears. The benefit of using hair snares is that locally or regionally you can actually collect your genetic material for monitoring the populations very systematically. They can be placed out in the field after a predetermined system to give good coverage, or for example cover an area in and out of browsing fields for, say, sheep or whatever. And this can be a good method to estimate local population sizes. Here you just see some pictures from an actual hair snare project, more specifically the one that I'm going to show you from now on, which is the trilateral project of monitoring the joint brown bear population in the Pasvik in Naripechenga area, which is shared between Norway, Finland, and Russia. This population is interesting and important because for Norway, it's one of the largest populations in the country. And it's also different from the rest of the brown bear population in the country. Further south in Norway, the brown bear population there is shared between Norway and Sweden, while up in the north and east, the brown bear population is actually, in Norway, is actually part of the Finnish and Russian population. So, and this you can see from the genetics, it's a different population, and it's one of the largest one in Norway. Here you see some more pictures of how this is done in the field. I mean, you see actually a sketch here, and this sketch I put up because it was drawn by an artist when we first started with this technique, and he basically envisaged how a hair trap works and what the bear does when it enters a hair trap. And for those of you that do not have any experience with hair snares or hair traps, it is basically barbed wire put around some trees, and in the middle you put a pile of twigs and moss and so forth, and on that pile you pour a smelling lure. It's made of fermented blood and fish usually, and it gives the bear no reward in terms of food, but the smell resembles the smell of a carcass, and it attracts the bears. And when they enter the trap to investigate the lure, in the process they put hair on the barbed wire, which we can bring back to the laboratory, analyze to get a unique genetic profile out. So in this trilateral population shared between Norway, Finland, and Russia, we've had non-invasive genetic monitoring ongoing since 2005, and it started out with collecting feces. But in 2007, for the first time, a hair snare project was initiated to more closely monitor the population in the area and estimate the minimum population size, and to find out if bears actually cross national borders and to what extent they do it. And hair snares have been shown to be good also to capture the more shy and elusive individuals. For example, females, which can be a bit more difficult to find and sample, they are also attracted to these lures. So then you get a good picture of both the male and female part of the population in an area. So this project was done for the first time in 2007, and then it was repeated again in 2011 and in 2015. And we also plan now for the fourth time to repeat this project again in 2019. So we have 4 separate and identical efforts where we later then will look at turnover rates of bears, how new individuals enter the population and old ones go out, and so forth. In the small map, you see the study area. It's here, and our station is located here at the very, very eastern and northern edge of Norway. There is Russia, and here is Finland. Norway generally lies to the west of Finland, but here we're at the east of Finland, very far east. The project is implemented by dividing a study area of approximately 1,400 square kilometers into 5 by 5 kilometer squares. And then you have squares in each of the 3 countries to monitor the joint brown bear population. And the principle is to put out these hare traps more or less simultaneously in all areas. In actual reality, it's quite some work. So usually setup takes about a week. And you put on the scent lure, and then 14 days later, you go back and check all the traps for hares. And then you add some more scent lure to boost the trap efficiency. Then you wait another 14 days, you come back, and actually this time you move the trap to a new location within the same square. This is simply to increase the efficiency of the trap, because bears that have already visited the traps, for example, they might not come back because they know there is nothing to find there. And by putting it somewhere else within the same square, you also increase the chance of finding new bears in that square that didn't find the trap in the first location. So usually we induce a translocation of traps in the middle of the project. And then we repeat the thing. We leave it out for 2 weeks, check for hare again, add scent lure, and then we come back on day 70, that is even 2 weeks later again, and check for a final time for hares. And then we remove all traces of the project from the nature. Here I show the results from this effort in 2015, the most recent one. And there were some 50 traps put out, divided among the 3 countries. And in total, during the 2-month period, we collected 209 hair samples. Initial genetic screening showed that 158 of these hair samples contained DNA, and the rest of them probably then didn't have hair sacs and were not suitable for genetic analysis. From those 158 samples that contained DNA, we obtained a complete DNA profile and identity for 136 samples. That's 65% of the samples. And within those 136 samples that were identified, there were 26 different brown bears. There were 17 female bears and 9 male bears. And actually, by comparing the results to our database, which contains several thousands of brown bear individuals and their genetic profiles, we found 13 brown bears that were not previously recorded. Here are the same results, but shown in a different way. And from this table, it is easy to see that some bears were found in traps in several countries. Actually, one bear was found in traps both in Norway, in Finland, and Russia. So this is immediately proof that bears actually cross the national borders, and maybe that's not unexpected, since they can move a lot and have relatively large home ranges. But anyway, it's nice to see that this is a functional population that actually moves relatively freely between the countries. Moreover, it's possible from this table to see which trap the bear was located in, if it was found multiple times during the study, and also if the bear was known from before, and in that case, which year it was observed last time. A little bit more about the project, a quick comparison of the hair trapping results from the same project when repeated across years. You can see that the sampling efforts carried out in 2007, 2011, and 2015 all produced a result that hints to between 20 and 30 brown bear individuals at the minimum. Remember that the numbers that we get here are minimum numbers, because you will not find all bears in an area. And the scat collection that goes on continuously, actually in the same area too, actually adds individuals to this. So there's probably a few more bears than this table indicates. The table doesn't show that there is, of course, a change of individuals across time here. And the rate at which this goes on will be part of future studies, because we plan also to make a scientific publication out of this when we have finished the efforts in 2019. Here's another picture just showing it on a map geographically where the brown bears are found within this study system. And it's quite clear that in some squares there are not so many bears, and that they're concentrated in other areas. So it is important information when we plan to understand this joint population and also harmonize conservation efforts. So this is the final slide. It's just some pictures that were collected from wildlife cameras while carrying out the project. And the brown bears, I can mention, they are not harmed by these traps. Actually, we often see bears from films that can use these as a scratching tool almost. And so we had, fortunately, no incidences that we know about where any animal was hurt during this. So these are relatively robust animals, and it seems like hair traps is actually a mild method to monitor them. So the project is an important tool for continued collaboration between the three countries in this area, and it's important for supplying updated information about the border crossing and joint brown bear population. So that is the summary of my talk. I could mention quickly at the end the challenges with such a project, because it is logistically demanding. It takes some time, and it takes effort and coordinated effort between different field persons. And that, of course, is a challenge in itself. And the other one is, of course, to gain funding for this from all three countries. Luckily, so far, we have succeeded in doing that, and therefore the study can continue. And as the study continues, the data grows in value, and hopefully this will aid us in securing funding for the study also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Snorri, for having shown us in detail the technical procedures of the methodology. And I wanted to ask you, in fact, people are really concerned about the safety of the methodology, and as you have said, they actually seem to enjoy as a scrapping tool. But have you ever found any incident with any other animals that might have been injured?
No, luckily. I have also wondered and been concerned about, for example, the potential that other animals like ungulates or for that matter, sheep or dogs could get ensnared and hurt in this. But fortunately, we never observed it or heard about it, and we never captured any such incidences in our wildlife cameras. So So I think on a general basis, it doesn't seem to be a problem, although you can never be sure, of course.
Thank you very much, Snorre, for your presentation. I will get back to you again for the debate, and meanwhile participants can start writing or can continue writing your questions to Snorre. Don't forget to address it to the correct speaker you want to ask your question to. Meanwhile, we'll try again. No, Ludek, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you all I hear very well, but I'm not sure about my voice, if it's very available. Do you hear me now?
Maybe participants beat your voice as the connection. But we try to make our best. Your voice, the connection. But we try to make our best to listen.
So, thanks a lot. Thanks for I can be here on this webinar, and I would like to speak a little bit about the history of Transboundary cooperation in links monitoring in the region, in the border region between Czech Republic, Bavaria, and Austria. It's clear that the large carnivores, including the Eurasian lynx, are the species with large, with a huge spatial requirements, and that's why this key species for nature conservation is also key species for international cooperation. On this map here, you know well, it's published from Plan in 2014, is the relatively recent status of the lynx distribution in Europe, and there's clear and it's verified that the total increase of occupied area is increasing during the last 40-50 years. But anyway, a lot of the population in Central and Western Europe is still very isolated, and they are still with low total numbers and relatively vulnerable. And this is also the case of so-called Bavarian Austrian population, which is mentioned under number 7 here, and as a main part of all the populations in the Central Europe, it comes from the resurrection activities in the early 70s on the Bavarian side of the mountain range, and during the 80s from the Czech side of the Shimla mountain range. Since the very beginning, after the reintroduction activities during 80s, there were really from the start of the new lynx occurrence in the region, there were activities to monitoring and to know somehow the status of this population in this region. And since 80s there were activities based mainly on the conventional methods as trapping and registration of all field signs of the lynx occurrence in the region. And starting from the very early 90s already, there were some activities on the transboundary level. I must say that a lot of these activities was based formally on personal connections and on the enthusiasm of people included in these activities. And it was, on the other hand, this enthusiasm and personal connectivities generated the activity and asking for some more complex research, which was supported during the years by many bigger and small projects. I've listed only the most important one on this in this presentation. Such a, I can say, start of systematic and complex research was done during the support within the project GEF biodiversity program in half of the 90s. It was starting with a VHF telemetry at the time, and all the basic information about the spatial requirements of the species in this environment, as well as daily activity, food composition, but also parasitology and other aspects of the biology of the links was started in a systematic and very complex way. The second big project was done during the INTERREG project in cooperation with two national parks, National Park Schmava and Bavarian Forest together, and this project was aimed to the research and ecology of lynx in relation to his main prey species here, the roe deer, in this typical middle high mountain region of the Schmava Mountains in this border region. During that time, already other new methods for research were used, as GPS telemetry, and also continuation of this complex aspect study. And also we more and more started to use some modern invasive methods, especially genetics and camera trapping, which were started to use in a systematic way during this project. Other two projects I would like to mention here, and it was Project Transboundary, supported by program INTERREG Objective 3, as the previous one. And this project was aimed mainly on the intensification of cooperation, not only between Bavaria and Czech Republic, but also Austria, and especially the whole population, to cover the whole population area by monitoring was one of the aim. During this project also was some aspects of this parasol and the potential and known migration corridors, where all these questions were confirmed and tested if it's a real situation or not during this project, mainly by this use of camera trapping methods. Recently, we have in our region Project 3 Links. It's within the Central Europe program, and this enabled us to cover really the whole study area, the whole real and potential distribution area of BBA, Bohemian, Bavarian, Austrian population of lynx, and to cover this study area by common monitoring system. And we are improving again the cooperation between three countries, and on this large-scale monitoring level, and also on the level of data evaluation. One important part of this project is also to build common, on the one hand, and on the second hand also the country-specific strategies for the conservation in all three countries. During the long time of lynx research and monitoring, we feel more important that international cooperation is necessary for any activity in research and especially in conservation of these large carnivores in Central Europe, but also for the most effective work and to achieve a good output from research and monitoring. Also, the combination of different available methods of research and monitoring is needed, as well as long-term and continuity of this monitoring and research, which is ensured. I must say that particularly because I'm working at the administration of the national park for a long time, I must say that all these projects mentioned above, they help us very much in to kick off and enlarge or to be better in quality of research and monitoring, but also our both administration of the national park, Šumava, as well as Bavarian Forest, are responsible, and they support for the continuity of the monitoring, which is really one of very important aspects to achieve reliable and relevant data for some evaluations. The last important aspect of our cooperation, and especially in the issue of large carnivores, is the monitoring of big area of as big as possible, ideally to monitor the whole area of distribution, because it's also experienced from the last years that many new aspects, especially of this aerosol of supplements, we are collecting only because we are now able to find really a huge area which is occupied by Eurasian lynx within BBA population. Of course, the aims why we do the research on this species is a lot of questions were already answered, and as usual research, one answered question generated several new challenges and questions. But anyway, we can say that we know really very much already about the basic spatial requirements of the lynx specifically in our conditions of our mountain range, as well as some basic aspects of lynx biology. Spatial activity density estimation is based on one systematic level, on the smaller study other area within the national park in some intensive way, but also because we have covered the whole population by extensive camera trapping system, we can also, I'm sure that in short future we will be able to say something about really the total numbers of the population, of the independent individuals, as well as the numbers of kittens and family groups within certain seasons, certain weeks a year. Also, other aspects were studied as a rhythm of daily activity, which is some aspects of this activity, spatial and daily activities, were already published in scientific papers. Foraging behavior as a very important aspect were studied. We use GPS telemetry not only to study the spatial requirements and activity, but also we collected long-term complete series of prey, and that we can calculate it very precisely. Total consumption of certain status groups of things within a time and spatial unit. It's already published also. What's for us still a big challenge? We know something, but it's still a lot of questions about the different types of population interactions and population structure, as well as spatial and social organization of the population as a whole, and also, of course, on the base of especially of the GPS telemetry data and VHF telemetry data, as well as good knowledge of habitat on a large scale, but also on fine scale was studied, and some aspects were already published in scientific papers as well. All this information support somehow for better understanding of biology and ecological aspects, how the variation links live in dominated lake landscapes and more natural or semi-natural landscapes within national park, but also outside. And all this obtained reliable data from management and species conservation is used as well. For example, in the Czech Republic, a lot of information from these projects were used for preparing the management plan for large carnivores. And very important aspect I will mention once more later is that we use this reliable data for discussions and for education of all stakeholders, especially hunters, farmers. Especially hunters are the most important interest group in relation to links, crimes, etc. of our region. Also, one aspect which was one of the outputs of our common studies were how to standardize different methods of long-term monitoring, especially camera tracking. We have now good standard methods which are comparable within two regions and between the years. And of course, as I already mentioned, also this data from research is used for some management decisions and for some for suggestions for management and conservation of links within the management plan. All our studies, so we can say that research and monitoring of links of the PBA population, we can theoretically divide it on two levels. One is the large-scale monitoring, and the second is research on different aspects of biology and ecology of the links. But of course, these two levels are interconnected, and it's good to combine the information, and especially some predictions, some population predictions and models are not possible to build without the good knowledge of basic demographic data, which is based on the basic research of biology. Now I can say that we have a lot of very complete picture of data on demography, especially on mortality, but also thanks to the last project, we have a lot of new information also about the dispersal of young animals, and based on that, we will ensure in the close future we can also can use this data for some predictions and some population viability models. What's clear is that already now that this VDA population is still very sensitive to all the risk factors, basically because the total number of the population is relatively low. The last estimations is something about 100 independent individuals, or a little bit more, but not very. So it's clear that it's not a population which is not of hundreds or thousands, and as such small and relatively still very isolated population is very vulnerable to both external as well as internal negative factors. The external is the most risk here is still the illegal killing, and unfortunately also the pressure on the environmental landscape, the human use of urbanization of the landscape outside, outside the national parks is increasing, and also the traffic is increasing. So we have proof that during the last, for example, during the last 5 years, there is a clear increase of traffic accidents and lynx killed by cars on the road. Of course, what's the biggest question is the isolation and potentially inbreeding processes within the population. That's why we would like to continue intensively genetic monitoring at the population level, as well as use the genetic methods for individual recognition of the individuals, and know more about the social structure within the population. The long-term existence of the links will depend in the future on the functional connectivity to the population. That's true that some positive steps were done, and also our data were used to establish some suggestions for landscape planning in large scale, not only in the National Park, of course, but on the larger scale within the whole Czech Republic, for example. And also to the future, I must say that the biggest challenge is I can again divide to two or three aspects or groups. One is to prolong and continue with the basic biological research, and try to understand more about the social interaction, communication, and social structure of the population, and some other aspects of interpopulation relationships using non-invasive methods, trapping in combination with genetics. Then to continue with the large-scale monitoring on the 3 countries level or more. And the third, which is the most important for the future conservation and survival of the population, is to use in different popular as well as scientific form all the data to present to the public and educate the main interest group, which is possible to influence somehow the survival of the population. So that's probably all in a very short way I wanted to say about our long-term work on the links research and conservation in 3 countries, the region Bavaria, Bohemia and Austria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ludiek. It was a really interesting presentation, and especially highlighted how our transboundary parks are working for a long-term commitment in managing the protected areas, and in this case, having a deep insight on the ecology and the biology of the lynx populations. Let me just, before we go to the debate, let me just highlight some important information for you. We have seen that international cooperation might be really an important way to collect data and to then use it to smooth the coexistence between people and large carnivores. And we have seen 3 monitoring purposes in these presentations. We have seen monitoring for to analyze the widespread and the dimension of the populations, but also we have seen how it can be used to to analyze the ecology and indeed the biology, the behaviors of the communities, but also as a tool to report incidents. Transboundary cooperation, and especially between our parks, are fundamental to gather an insightful data that would help protected area managers to take better decisions. So what I would like to invite you is for our next TransParkNet meeting. If you enjoyed what you have heard here today from our transboundary parks, well, I'm sure you will enjoy the TransParkNet meeting, because in this special meeting where all our transboundary areas come together, they speak about large carnivores, but also about all the other aspects of work that they are developing together. So a really inspiring event that will take place between the 11th and the 14th of June in Scandinavia, in the transboundary area encompassed by Olanka National Park and Panajärvi in Russia. All informations are available in TransParkNet, in our website, and registrations will open soon. And another important information is where you can find more about our Transboundary Parks program. If you go to europarc.org, Nature and People, you'll find an entire section about transboundary cooperations, where you can see the latest news and get a glimpse of our transboundary parks across Europe. And if you are interested in learning more about the program, please contact my colleague Stefania Petrosilo. You have her email below, and I will be publishing all these links so that you can follow them in the coming days. And without taking any more time from our debate, I would like to ask to start with Snorre. Snorre, we have seen that the methodology that you included, it's proving to be very successful for the monitoring of brown bear. But do you think that this methodology would also work with other species, especially with other large carnivore species? And would it also work in areas more densely populated? What are your considerations about it?
That's a good question, and I think to some extent it has been tried with other large carnivore species with success, but I think it's most commonly used for monitoring brown bear population, and it has been done in several countries. For example, I know that they're testing it out now in Canada on a large scale, and in the United States they've been doing this for a long time already. And they have much larger hair snare projects than we do here in Europe and Scandinavia. In regards to whether it's possible to implement it in more populated areas, I think it would be possible, but of course, part of successful implementation is to talk with the public and talk with the people in the area, so that they are informed and engaged in monitoring these species. And that's an important part of working with large carnivores, their conservation and their monitoring, is that you actually need people's help to get good numbers. And that's also why large carnivore monitoring, especially the type of monitoring that is based on non-invasive genetic sampling, is very dependent on help from, for example, hunters and the public, in addition to systematic sampling by scientists.
As you mentioned antlers, Roderick also directed you a question, Snorre. Is there any cooperation with hunters going on in the region? Snorre, did you hear my question?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking Roderick. Can you please repeat the question?
No. Roderick was asking you if there is any kind of cooperation work with hunters in the region.
Well, it works very fine, and actually it's implemented on a national scale in Norway and Sweden, and it is based on the fact that we all have a joint responsibility to monitor these populations, to provide the best possible management and conservation for the future. So actually, it's not based on a system of payment or other benefits. It's simply based on well, trying to get people motivated to contribute to increased knowledge base for monitoring and conservation. So yes, I would say that the collaboration with hunters goes very well, and here locally it has also been part of the monitoring program for many years. So they provide very important help.
Thank you very much, Snorre. I will get back to you in a second, but I would like to ask now Roderick about the methodology, and there is a specific question about who enters the data online on a conflict. So is this made by some governmental organization based on official reports, or a regular person submitting his observation can have, for example, incident with a specific species? How is it working?
Yes, thank you. It is a difficult question because, as far as I know, for example, from the hunter side, they can submit all kinds of information. But I don't know how the official procedure regarding conflict with, for example, reindeer works, because there's specific policy on also repaying damages and things like that. What I assume is that you need to indicate to the responsible government agency, so either from Sweden or Norway, the conflict, and then you are probably, but that's my own assumption, are encouraged to also register it on the monitoring web base as I've shown it. So, because that is how the scat collection for example, the hunters works. They can have a kit sent home together with specific instructions how to use it. And they will have to send that kit to the responsible government agency, who will then process it. And they are actually then also required to submit that the SCAT and also the GPS locations and things like that onto the monitoring database. And actually through that database, they can also follow when the data has been analyzed. And then when that data is analyzed, they can actually see whether the DNA of this individual has been collected before. They can, if there is a history of that individual wolf, they can see that history, and they could even see other places where it has been, like the scats has been captured, so they actually can see themselves. Oh, I've seen this wolf, and where does it come from, and etc. So that is really interesting to see, and in that database, basically everybody can submit something, but the verification is done by the government agency, which I think is also the case for the entrance of a conflict data. Thank you.
Exactly, it makes sense. It works like that. In fact, the genetic material is proving to be very interesting to see the dispersion and to analyze the behavior of the individuals. But still on you, Roderick, does this DNA information, for example, provide you information about hybrids between dog and wolf? Do you know if any information of this type has been found so far?
Yes, that was a very interesting question, because it's a pretty big debate in Europe on this issue of hybridization. I did a quick search on both of the government agency websites, and I couldn't find at the moment some information on whether they actually analyze the data also for that purpose. I assume that they will also have that kind of data, but I can't find whether they do that. So if the person that asked the question, it was Kaya, wants me to ask, for example, our Swedish member, I can give that question to them.
Okay, so Kaya, maybe you can get in contact directly with Roderick afterwards. Another question to you, Roderick, and this is more about how FACE is being able to engage hunters. So are hunters receiving any special training, or is there set up any kind of reward system?
Yes, those were also very, very good and interesting questions. So I'll take them both combined. As far as I know and I could find, there's no specific reward, financial rewards for the monitoring. Yeah, as far as I know, there is no financial reward for that. As Snorre already clarified, there is actually quite some interest from the hunters to engage in this. And one of the best interests that hunters have is that you can always stand on the sideline and say the data that has been presented is not good enough. It's even better if you can get active yourself and try to improve the data. So for example, in Sweden, part of the moose hunting season, I think it's the first week, hunters are encouraged to, specifically in that period, to share any kind of observation that they have through the monitoring system that I've shown, and to then share that data with the government authorities to try and help the government authority and others to improve the data, because you can't do it alone. That is, I think, something that we've seen thus far. They get some, I don't know if I can call it training, but you can find quite some extensive information on, for example, the Swedish Hunters Association website on how to collect the data. Unfortunately, most of it is in Swedish, so I've been able to translate it into English with Google Translate, and you get a pretty good sense of the kind of information flow that's going around. I'm not sure if there is an official monitoring course for hunters. What I do know is that they have quite an intensive course to get your hunting permit. This is one of the major benefits of having qualified hunters, is that you have these volunteers that already have a certain knowledge base, who should be able to discern certain animal species from each other, which then also makes it easier for them to contribute to such a monitoring system. So that is, they get that kind of courses, and you need to be able to, for example, distinguish certain mammal species from each other. So that is that is an obligatory part for the hunting permit, and they give quite some guidance on, for example, the collection of scats. If somebody is interested, that you can find that, for example, on the Swedish Hunters Association website. If you can't find it, I can always send you a link to the specific pages where they really, to the very tiny detail, explain exactly what you need to do with the test tube, how to collect it, how to make sure that you don't collect multiple samples in one sample, and things like that. So yeah, that I think should answer Marijke's and Ivana's question.
It did. Thank you, Roderick. Let me just direct you one final question. You, as a person working in between people to mediate their perspectives, do you think, on your personal experience, that by the fact that hunters are engaged with this monitoring tool, will this help to ease the conflict between people and large carnivores, or at least to work on their perceptions?
Yes, I think this is one of the most important tools that either a government agency or, for example, somebody managing a conservation project or, for example, protected area has to include hunters in the conservation of species that they are not directly involved with. So, for example, if they're not able to hunt a species, including these people in monitoring is a very good way of engaging them into that conservation in a very practical manner. And not only hunters, but I think any kind of people, also farmers, also other landowners, etc. And as we've seen from Ludek's presentation, there is quite some problems with certain species and illegal killing. So there are things happening. And hopefully, and that's also a question that I had for Ludek, also the monitoring should also add to that perspective. But can we get any kind of information on what is happening, which is very important. And it also increases the trust between people, individuals, stakeholder groups, and trust in the data that is out there. There's nothing worse than just having a discussion on the data, while you could also put some effort into actually conservation work on the ground. That for me is a pretty big learning experience for myself working in this area. And I always see that if you work together, you can achieve pretty great things. And I always say, and that's maybe especially my personal opinion, and I can say this because I'm a hunter, but they can be a little bit weird sometimes. You need to be able to, a little bit learn what it is to be a hunter. You need to be able to step in their shoes to know what it is like. It's also being able to work with them. But as soon as you have the trust of the hunters, you're very much capable of doing great things in certain areas. So I would encourage anybody, if they are not already doing it, certainly engage with the hunters.
Thank you very much, Roderick. Yeah, that's definitely a lesson to be learned by particular areas all over Europe, because often they are seen as conflict stakeholder groups, and in fact they can be allies of the work for conservation. So thank you very much, Roderick. We are already a bit late on time, but I would still like to ask a question you addressed to Ludak about the poaching information. So are you able, Ludiak, in you Okay, we are still facing some troubles with Ludek's sound. So I will just shortly ask another question to Snorre, and it's about how the results of this intensive monitoring that you are doing go along with the national level results, especially in Norway. And these participants especially interested in knowing if extrapolations would result in legitimable estimations. What is your experience on that, Snorre?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because if this approach is going to work, you need to be able to estimate the populations and possible challenges with a certain precision. And basically, like all other monitoring efforts, it's based here on how many of the bears you're able to capture. So when you use, for example, non-invasive genetic techniques, it's based on how many times do you find the same bear again and again in a given year compared to how many new individuals you find. And of course, the more samples you obtain from each individual bear, and relative to how many new individuals you find, the more sure you can be that you have actually monitored the majority of the bears. So if you want a precise estimate here, you need to have a sampling effort that actually provides a fairly good number of recaptures, so to speak. You need to know the population well, whether you do it with more classical methods or you do it with genetics.
Thank you, Snorre. Another technical question regarding the use of data. A participant said that this can contribute to further define a occupancy model. Have you also an analysis in this direction?
Yes, I mean, we have not worked with such models with the data that we have so far, but with the large databases that we have accumulated, certainly this is an interesting option for the future. So, I mean, lots of research have been going on now in the last decades about these recovering populations in Europe, and a lot of the scientific publications and efforts have actually been simply to document basic things about population structures and connectivity, and identify challenges for the remnant populations and so. And when it comes to those kind of models, that's been more the focus of ecologists. But I think the best way to learn more could be to combine these kinds of data, ecological observations and also genetics, to for example, do occupancy modeling, landscape modeling, and so forth. And this will, of course, provide new insight into the biology of these species and how they potentially will react to changes in their environment. So yes, I have considered it, but I have not done it at present.
Thank you, Snorre. It was really curious when we contacted the Harvikinadi Trilateral Park. They direct us to you because they are working in partnership with the research institution, which is also a very good example of international cooperation and an effort that is being taken by the several entities across the countries. So my question is, you mentioned that these data can be used indeed for landscape modeling or for occupancy modeling, but do you have any concrete examples on how the management of these protected areas in the 3 countries are using the data?
Well, they basically use the data to inform the management in the different countries and also the public, of course, about the status and the challenges for these populations. And as you said, they collaborate with institutions like NIBIO to provide a more scientific point of view based on the monitoring data. So we, in a way, come in here to support them and provide the more objective interpretation of some of these numbers, but they themselves, to a large extent, take care of the networking, the communication with end users, with managers, and so forth across the country borders.
Thank you very much, Snorri. We are already ahead of time, so I will close the webinar for today. I just want to thank once more for the fantastic presenters we have had. Snorri, Roderick, Ludia, it was a great pleasure to hear you, and thank you for sharing the technicalities of the projects you are implementing. So by tomorrow, you will all receive the recordings of this webinar and also a webinar and also a direct email where you can download the presentations of all the participants. And you can always find out all the information in our website under europarc.org/previous webinars. Just a final note, if you are interested in EUROPARC webinars or you even would like to suggest a new topic, please don't hesitate to contact me at p.fais@europarc.org. We are always open for new suggestions. And a final thank you to the EU platform on the coexistence between people and large carnivores. We have been cooperating with the platform and providing the inputs to our direct network. So thank you once more. Feel free to share with us your cases, your methodologies, and if you are starting a new project on transboundary management of large carnivores, do visit our website and our toolkit, or even provide us your case studies, so we can keep jointly connecting knowledge about the best ways to promote coexistence between people and large carnivores. So thank you, all of you, once more for your time. I hope I see you again in the next EUROPARC webinars. We will have 2 webinars in May, and they will be shortly announced. Thank you once more. And if you want any more information, don't hesitate to visit our website. Thank you and have a nice day. Thank you to all the participants. Goodbye.